Rome did not fall in a single moment. It did not collapse with a scream, nor with one final battle that shook the world and announced the end of an age. There was no thunder, no dramatic sign from the heavens, no clear moment when the people of Rome could say, "This is when it ended." Rome fell quietly. It fell on a night when the city still believed it would see another sunrise. As darkness settled over the ancient capital, torchlight flickered along streets paved with stone older than memory itself. The flames bent and trembled in the wind, casting restless shadows across walls built by men who believed they were building eternity. Massive gates stood closed, heavy and silent, guarding a city that had once ruled the known world, not just with armies, but with ideas. Marble temples reflected a dim, uncertain glow. Columns rose into the darkness, like the ribs of a giant long past its prime. Statues of emperors stood motionless in the night, their faces carved in confidence, their eyes forever fixed on a future they could no longer see. These figures had once represented unquestioned authority. Now they were witnesses, unable to speak. For centuries, Rome had shaped nations, commanded legions, and bent history to its will. Roads stretched outward from the city like veins, carrying power, law, and language across continents. To be Roman was not merely to belong to a place, but to belong to destiny itself. Its people were raised on a single belief, repeated so often it hardened into truth. Rome was eternal. That night, life continued as if nothing fundamental had changed. A merchant closed his shop and counted coins by torchlight, though he knew their value had faded. Trade routes had weakened. Taxes had grown heavier. The market still opened each morning, but fewer people believed in what they promised. Gold still existed, but trust in it did not. In a quiet villa tucked behind high walls, a senator lingered over his wine. He stared at statues of rulers long dead, men who once commanded armies and reshaped borders, now reduced to stone and dust. For the first time, he wondered whether power ever truly belonged to those who held it, or whether it merely passed through them, indifferent and temporary, leaving only monuments and regrets behind. Nearby, a mother held her child closer than usual. She listened to the silence between distant sounds, disturbed by a feeling she could not name. Nothing had happened yet, and yet something felt wrong. The night seemed heavier than it should have been, as if the air itself were waiting. Rome had survived fires, plagues, assassinations, and civil wars. It had endured chaos within and threats without. Each time, it had rebuilt itself, stronger in appearance, if not in spirit. The idea of Rome falling had become unthinkable not because it was impossible, but because it was inconvenient to believe. Beyond the city walls, the world had already moved on. Fires burned on the horizon, scattered across the darkness like distant stars. Enemy camps glowed faintly in the night. They did not rush the city. They did not shout or charge or demand surrender. They waited. They understood something Rome had forgotten long ago. Empires rarely fall from force alone. They fall from exhaustion. On the walls, guards stood watch. Their silhouettes stretched long against stone worn smooth by centuries of hands and history. Their armor was cracked and ill-fitted, repaired too many times with too few resources. Their weapons were dull, not from use, but from neglect. Reinforcements had been promised for years. Each season brought new assurances, new delays, new explanations. The legions that once marched without fear were now scattered, thin, and tired. Defense had become ritual rather than strategy. Orders were given because they always had been, not because anyone still believed they would work. The walls still stood, but belief had left them. No bells rang that night. No alarm sounded. Danger did not announce itself with fire or fury. It did not crash against the gates in a single overwhelming moment. It lingered, patient and invisible, slipping through cracks that had been ignored for too long. It hid in complacency, in denial, in the quiet assumption that tomorrow would resemble yesterday. Rome was still standing, but it was already hollow. As the night deepened, unease spread through the city like a slow-moving shadow. Dogs barked at empty streets. Footsteps echoed where no one should have been. The wind carried unfamiliar sounds, not screams, not battle cries, but movement. Careful, measured, unhurried. Some sensed it. An old man whispered prayers to gods whose temples still stood, though their power had long since faded. A soldier tightened his grip on his spear, feeling the weight of responsibility without the comfort of confidence. He knew, without fully understanding why, that it would not be enough. Doors were barred from the inside, not against thieves, not against neighbors, but against history itself. Rome had believed that walls, titles, and traditions could stop time. It believed that what had always been would always remain. It believed decline was something that happened elsewhere, to others, far from the center of the world. Before gone, the truth became impossible to ignore. The gates were compromised, not through brilliance or strength, but through decay, neglect, and betrayal. Mechanisms that once protected the city had been weakened quietly over years of corruption and indifference. No single decision caused the collapse. 1,000 small choices did. Panic did not explode all at once. It crept. First came whispers, then hurried footsteps, then running. People fled through streets they had walked all their lives, suddenly strangers to the stones beneath their feet. Gold was abandoned where it fell. Status meant nothing. Titles offered no protection. Senators and servants moved with the same fear in their eyes, stripped of the illusions that had separated them for so long. The empire that had promised order dissolved into confusion. Temples still stood. Forums still echoed with hurried voices. Statues still watched from the shadows. But Rome was no longer Rome. This was not the fall of a city. It was the death of an idea. When morning came, the sun still rose over the ruins of certainty. Light touched the same walls, the same streets, the same monuments. Birds returned to places they had always nested. Life, in some form, continued. But something essential was gone. The belief that Rome could not fall had vanished. And without that belief, the empire was nothing more than stone and memory. Power lingered briefly, like a shadow after sunset, but it no longer commanded the future. The empire would survive in name. It would persist in fragments, in laws copied by others, in roads used by new powers, in languages shaped by its past. Historians would argue over dates and causes. Some would blame invasions. Others would blame corruption, politics, or fate. But the truth was simpler and far more dangerous. Rome fell the moment it believed it no longer needed to protect itself. The night before its collapse was not filled with chaos or glory. It was filled with denial. Empires do not die when their walls are breached. They die when the people stop believing they can fall. And every empire that followed Rome, whether it lasted centuries or only decades, would walk the same path long before the final night ever arrived.